Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Behave with Sue. My name's Sue Cowley and I'm an author and teacher trainer. And I'm making a series of short videos to support you in managing behaviour. So today I'd like to talk some more about establishing expectations. And it probably feels like I'm going on and on about this part of the process. But actually that's because it's a really crucial aspect of ensuring that you get the best behaviour possible. So one of the things about expectations is it can be very tempting to think that it's a one-off deal. So you tell your students what it is that you want or need, and then you kind of forget to refer back to it again. But actually, when it comes to expectations, the crucial thing is repeating, reinforcing, but most of all, modelling. Because the problem you've got is, if you say to a class or a group, these are my expectations, but then you don't follow through, you may as well have not told them that you had that expectation in the first place. And this is the really tricky bit about expectations, because it requires us to really be willing to follow through with what we've said we mean. And in fact, it's probably the case that if you're not willing to follow through, you might even be better not saying that thing in the first place. So one of the expectations that teachers always talk about to me when I work with them is this idea of an expectation that the children will listen to you. Not just to you either, but they will listen to each other, and that they will do so respectfully and in silence. Now, this is probably the number one expectation that teachers tell me that they want to get in place. But it's also probably the number one expectation that is really hard to achieve. Now, when you're aiming to get silence, there are actually lots of different ways you can do it. So when the first edition of my book on behaviour came out, I had an email from a teacher. He was a secondary teacher. And he said to me in the email, "Sue, I read your book, I followed your advice, I waited for silence, and I was still waiting 20 minutes later." And the thing about ensuring that you get silent attention is that it's not the only way to do it, just to wait for it. The thing that's really crucial for you to try and achieve is that you put it across to the children you are definitely not going to talk over them. But not talking over them is not the same thing as never achieving anything until they're completely silent. So if they're refusing to be silent for you and you've established that expectation clearly, what do you actually do? Well, one of the first things that I would do is I would go and sit with that group of learners, and there is always some, no matter how difficult the class, who are actually waiting to start your lesson. Go and sit with them or crouch down beside them and say to them, "Thank you so much for being ready to listen and ready to learn. Shall I tell you a bit about what we're going to be doing today?" And the rest of the class will be looking at you and going, "Hang on a sec, why aren't you teaching us?" And the message you're sending them is that that expectation of one voice is clear, it's certain. I am not going to address the whole class until there is one voice, but that doesn't mean there's nothing else that I can do. You're also showing them that the reward, essentially, of your attention will be given to those learners who are doing the right thing. And this is a really tricky aspect of managing behaviour, because so often it is counterintuitive. The instinctive urge when the children aren't listening is to direct your ire at the whole class. But actually you need to put that urge to one side and you need to think in your mind, okay, what's going to be the best alternative solution to waiting for silence or shouting at the whole class? I need you to be silent. And that alternative solution will vary again according to the phase that you're in. So, for instance, one of the things I've tried in secondary in the past is starting to write a message to the class on the board, saying something like, "If you won't all fall silent within the next few minutes, then unfortunately I am going to have to ... And by the time you're halfway through writing that, your learners will probably be looking at it and saying, what the hell's going on, and starting to pay attention. Another thought, particularly for trainees and NQTs, about this idea of one voice and ensuring silent attention is that you don't always have to start your lesson with a period of whole class teaching. Most of the time that's the natural thing to do, but actually there's nothing to stop you from, for instance, having an activity on the desk for them to get on with when they come in, for the first bit of your lesson being about some peer-to-peer teaching. So think flexibly, and the thing that needs to be clear and certain is the expectation, but that doesn't mean you can't try flexible ways of getting to the point where that expectation is achieved. Now, beware of one thing, which is the kind of end of week syndrome. So as you get towards the end of the week and also the end of the day, what tends to happen is you have less energy, you're a bit more stressed, and you're a bit less keen on pushing through on those expectations. So one of the things you can do to kind of counteract this is to not put yourself in a position where you are going to be having to do long periods of whole class teaching when it's going to be difficult to get the children silent. So think flexibly about the methods you use in terms of teaching during the course of the day, and maybe towards the end of the day or week, adapt those methods so the children are doing more of the work than you are as the teacher. Just to finish with one lovely story that I was once told. I was talking to a teacher who teaches secondary science, and she said one of the things that she does is that she videos herself introducing the lesson, so demonstrating an experiment, and she then plays the video to her learners at the start of her lessons. And this has two advantages. The first advantage is that the learners are more likely, apparently, to watch a video of you than they are to watch you. And the second advantage is she can leave that video playing during the course of the lesson so the learners can watch the explanation over and over again. So I'm going to finish up there in terms of expectations, and in our next episode I'm going to move on to the idea of rewards and consequences, and what happens if your learners are or are not meeting the expectations that you have set. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.